All right, so properly, welcome to the distribution demo for August 26th, 2021. Today, I'm going to give an example of a long-standing problem that we've had within the CNG, whether it be Kubernetes or just the containers themselves. When you're doing a roll of the deployment, you're doing an upgrade or say a massive reconfigure, there are instances where the pods will be restarting and you'll have one version with one set of assets and another version with a different set of assets. Our containers explicitly package only the assets they actually need as a matter of not wasting resources on pull, on deploy, and storage. The problem lies in when during that transition, pod A is at version, say, 1407, and pod B is at version, say, 14.1.2. What you end up in that situation is that the assets might be requested by either pod. So if the user's request hits pod A, and that gives them HTML, that HTML says, I need these assets, and that, however, then gets routed to pod B. Pod B doesn't have the assets from pod A, thus can't serve them. And now you get a UI that's either missing chunks, blank, or just doesn't behave in the way that you would expect because we don't actually have all of it. So in an attempt to address this problem without actually making use of a CDN, because you can do that now, but it's poorly documented and complicated, what I've found is that I can build a very minimal container and then deploy just that Nginx and use Nginx to actually provide assets from both containers by using an init container that actually pulls the assets from the two running container versions. This is why it has to be an additional deployment. So you kind of deploy an additional set of assets or a Helm chart that pulls in the two sets of assets for you, shims itself into the existing ingress on the host name, and then off we go, because now it answers all of the requests for /assets, at least in the case of using Nginx. So with that said, let me hit share screen. What we basically have here is I've got my Kubernetes cluster. It's not got anything installed right now. Let me walk you through what I have. I have a config map that overrides the Nginx container. So I'm basically taking the nginx.conf and I'm stripping it down to the absolute bare minimum required to operate. We are making use of a specific utility that's present in Nginx, which is try files. Basically, we say anytime you get a request under assets, attempt it under this path, and then if that doesn't work, attempt it under the next path, and then if that entirely fails, return 404. Our deployment is not complicated. We're deploying 2 replicas in this particular case just to show that you can have more than one. The init containers populate a directory that we call assets that we mount in here. And we go for the first version that we're concerned about. So the version we're upgrading from. We copy those assets in under A, and then we do the next version that we're concerned about, and we copy that in under B. And then the running container is just Nginx on the latest version, running the Alpine image, so as small as we can get it without having to fight with it. Right? We mount the nginx.conf. This completely overrides all of the containers behavior because we're mounting on top of their configuration that has includes or literally anything else. And we're only caring that we have a temp disk that's actually disk backed, because we don't want to consume all of the space and assets in memory if we used memory backed empty dir. From that, we have a service listening on port 8000. Thus, we don't have to worry about port 80 and things complaining. And then we're defining an ingress. This matches to everything else that we have in our deployment. This is not a chart right now. This is literally just a manifest. So we have an ingress for GitLab assets, okay, the same namespace that I'll install a chart into here in a moment. And then we're saying this is this matched host to what we're making use of, and the TLS configuration is matched to the way I'm about to deploy my Helm chart. And it says to pass to that and only care about assets path. There's nothing horribly complicated to it at all. So I've got 0.7 to match what I have configured here. We'll do a nice fresh install of that chart with new data. So this is a from scratch, other than I already have the secrets made, I already have TLS pre-provided. There's no data, so we're just going to spin that all the way up. Yes, it still takes a moment to seed the entire database. We'll see the first couple of init errors, unsurprisingly, because migration job is still running. This is after all why we have the dependencies container. Certainly seeming to be taking its dear sweet time. There it goes. And we have our first operational container. Of course, my local DNS has decided to not play nicely. So I'm waiting for it to actually show up on my side. If anybody else wants to go ahead and pull up the website there. I'm going to attempt to clear my DNS cache. Stop share for a second. There we go. Now that we've got that actually in play, I am going to Control Y, F, build temp time, apply the manifest. It dislikes my API version. Okay. Telling you I used this before. Apparently I need to populate my selector because I forgot it. Think it's label selector? Because I don't remember. Match labels. What did I typo? Spec template metadata labels value. Apparently I didn't actually put the labels on it, so it caused an issue. This is, by the way, what I get for updating my versions and then not trying it again. All right, so they are now actually fully deployed. I'll go in here. We'll now see that GitLab assets exists. So we got 2 containers there. If I watch the logs on this one, go in here. You can see it's serving Webpack, bundles, etc. Right, so over to the admin here. Come back here. Upgrade. Got 1.2. And upgrade it in place with the existing configuration. So while that rolls, I'm going to go ahead and just peruse around my stuff. Go ahead and turn off sign up, save changes, back to the dashboard. Hopefully I don't have any views reports. This is a brand new instance, right? Project. And go with a new one. SDF. Public initialize, create. Now, that I can't fix because while Gitaly respawns, you can't do anything with Gitaly. You won't see that if you have prefect because we use a staple set behind it. So there's only one that goes down at a time. But you do see it if you're using a single Italy, which this demo has. Go ahead and resubmit Italy. Come on. Now we're just outright getting 500s, of course. I'll bet if I watch the logs on that, it's all like, I can't talk to Italy. Oh, no, this is the 14.0 versus 14.1 versus etc. Post-migrations problem. There was a rename of a table, by the way, in 14.1, 14.2, which resulted in that exact error. And that's the underlying Rails condition. I guess I could have done with 14.1 and 14.2, and I shouldn't have hit this massive everybody's going to break on the database problem. Oops. It doesn't really help with me showing that the assets work when it's 500s all the time, does it?
Well, hey, the 500 images are coming from the assets.
I'm pretty sure, actually. Let's see, network. That comes from favicon, so that's actually not. There we go. The favicon redirect, though, is. There you go. Yeah, so in theory, of course, now we're getting 502s, and there we go. There's the assets without complaint. Are we already on the new ones? Yeah, we just fired into the second new one while we waited for the database to catch up. Okay, well, it works. And then all you do is come back here and delete. Remove the assets, and you're done. I'm going to hit stop on that. This is a two-pronged example here. So first off, what I intended to show is the assets, and you can see that all of the assets from all of the versions of the pod are indeed being delivered from the assets container, so we don't have to worry about that. What we also happen to experience this time is the problem of the application's view of the database, aka the object relational model caches the schema in memory. So it knows which columns exist, what table is where, and which things it should look for in the database without actually having to go query the database every time it needs to query the database, right? When we're doing a production upgrade, we would normally do run the migrations, roll the pods, run post migrations, roll the pods in that behavior. This particular case, because we're not splitting pre and post migrations, all of the migrations happen, and that particular table rename is what we deem as a post transaction because we don't want to break the running application. So because I'm not actually executing this according to the SRE pattern for running rolling upgrades, I hit that one because there happens to be a post transaction in that set of versions. Oops. If I were to do this manually, disable the migrations job, then go into task runner, run the migrations, intentionally skipping post, and then restart all of the pods, and then repeat the process after I've done post transactions, we in theory wouldn't hit this issue. It's an example of why we need the upgrade logic in the actual operator, is because we need to be able to have that handling of pre and post migrations. Any thoughts?
I think it looks good. It's fairly simple solution. Like we've come up with ideas on how we were going to solve this for a while, but it's been in place. It's taken a while, right? So a lot of those ideas, often related with uploading the assets into object storage and then pulling them back down into each workhorse or something like that. They might be good ideas, but this seems like a simple way to get started. Like even in the approach you have right now, it could already be documented pretty much for people to try if they wanted it, right? Then I anticipate we could make like either another chart around it or bake it into our chart. You can turn it on first type thing, right? And then turn it on after deploy.
Right. The tricky part, as I see it, is baking it into the chart. We want to do this primarily on is upgrade, so it becomes a very much Helm release thing. The good news is the behavior is super easy to replicate, and because it doesn't rely on object storage to do it or trying to offload it somehow through MinIO, you're not reliant on MinIO itself. You're not reliant on attaching a disk to Nginx, the Ingress controller. You don't want to do that. This should work on-prem or off-prem, and without having to worry about transit to and from, because you're already going to have these containers effectively locally anyways, because when you do the upgrade, you're going to have to pull the workhorse container. So this assets pattern basically ensures that you're going to be using the exact same containers you were about to deploy anyway. So you're not duplicating network traffic, you're not duplicating storage, and when you remove the assets, all of that temporary usage goes away. It would be interesting to explore deploying it directly into our existing Helm chart. The problem is then you still have the possibly long-term use of that asset's behavior upon installation or upon upgrade. Because how long do you need asset shim to exist? So that's the interesting part. One thought, DJ, is as we pull the operator logic out, the one thing that the operator logic does is it flags all of the deployments and stateful sets as paused. Where if we were able to actually do the deployments of, say, task runner, but then pause all the other Rails ORM items, Sidekick, Rails, or web service, and anything else bound to it, then in theory, we should be able to still have it be paused, do those, and then initiate the rolling upgrade. That's all the containers would have the new state. And then what you would then end up doing is running the upgrades, unpause those deployments, let them roll out, then run post migrations, and then re-roll this new deployment. Because at that point, you don't really care about which deployment it is. You literally just say kube control rollout deployment name and let it re-roll the deployment. That's the one thing our chart doesn't do without flagging the operator logic into play, which is highly deprecated, is have the ability to just pause them. So there's some bits of that operator logic when we go to pull it out that we may actually want to keep. Might want to rename it, but keep.
Yeah, possibly. I think the new operator may not require the same pausing flags, like because we were having to deal with the fact that Helm was already rolling these out type thing, which with the new operator we have better control over it not having that happen to begin with type thing.
Exactly. And that was the problem, is we were fighting between the operator and Kubernetes and Helm. All three were trying to change the state. And they all just kind of fought. You didn't know exactly what the behavior was. So with our operator, it actually becomes super easy because we can literally just insert paused when we want it to be, and then remove that when we don't want it to be. Because we have that logic built in, because we're not actually using Helm to do the deployment. We're not having to fight with, is Tiller trying to set assets behavior on something we just deployed with the operator? That's completely out of the way. I think even in Helm 3, it might be far less of a problem, but that doesn't matter in the end. All right. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, then with a set of crickets, we shall call it a demo. It's 1, crickets 2, crickets 3.